Hi, it's another kind of blustery day here in Shropshire. We had a glorious day yesterday and now it's overcast. So I thought I would take the opportunity to show you the setup of my wormery as it will be going forward, so that I want to start getting a good routine with it so I can harvest as much as possible. Otherwise it's just a piece of kit that's not really serving any purpose and it costs quite a bit of money, so I don't want to waste it. I want to make it as efficient as possible. So I'm going to show you the setup that I've got, or that I will be doing going forward, and hopefully it'll make a bit of sense and will show you the cyclical process that is needed to keep it going, to get as much compost or vermiculture as possible. I took the opportunity while it's still a bit overcast to move the wormery from the potting shed outside. So we've got it sat there at the moment. That's because yesterday was a really warm day and the potting shed I suddenly realised at the end of the day that it was baking hot. So I quickly moved it here, which is north facing and pretty much doesn't get much sun. It might get some morning sunshine, and at this time of year that's probably going to be helpful because of the cooler nights, but I will eventually be moving it further into the corner so it definitely doesn't get any heat in the day during summer. But because it's still early spring, I'm going to leave it there for the time being so it maybe gets a bit of warmth in the morning to keep it going, so to speak. When I bought the wormery, probably just under a year ago now, I bought probably the biggest system that they had, so it's 4 tiers. In hindsight, that probably was not required. Certainly for the majority of this year, up until February, so for the majority of the time that I had it, I was only using 1 tier. So the further 3 tiers, I was doing nothing with. The worms didn't seem to be feeding properly. I wasn't really getting any compost. I didn't know how it worked. So now I've investigated it further and worked out what to do. So I have 4 tiers, but actually, in hindsight, that was a poor decision on my part. You really only need 3. The 4th is an extra, but it's not necessary. So if you're thinking about getting a wormery, don't buy one. Don't go for the 4 tiers if you don't need to. If it's extra money, if it's part of the cost, then fair enough. But really, it just complicates the system. So let me show you what I'm going to be doing going forward, and we shall see how easy it's going to be. Each of the tiers in the wormery consists of a tray that is, I don't know, about 6 inches deep, something like that. With a grid system, all exactly the same. So I've got 4 trays that look like this. As I say, 3 is absolutely fine. So the bottom box is really just a stand. It doesn't comprise of anything more than it's kind of one of these upside down. There's nothing really to it. It's just a stand for everything else to go on. This box here is a drain, so it has a tap which is supposed to drain off any excess fluid. I'm not, as it's up until this point, that has never been required for me. Even though this whole system is very damp, it's not created any extra fluid for me to drain off. That could just be my system and how it's running. It may be different for somebody else, but so far I've not needed to use this tap. So from there on, we've got the 3 trays, so that sit inside of each other. So if you can see within the tray, there are kind of little shelves. So you'll never go any deeper than these shelves, which is why you're seeing this level here. So it's the same indicator on the back. So it's not going to go past there, and you've also got the bedding protected here. So that's how the system's set up. This is just a lid. I'm not sure why it needs to be that shape. Don't imagine it makes anything any different, but it helps keep the system dark. So the worms do not like light, so they need to be kept in the dark and relatively more warm, about 20 degrees, 70 Fahrenheit ish, to keep them happy. So we have the 3 systems, the 3 trays in process. So let me just talk you through those. So these are the 3 trays. The top tray is the feeding tray. So that's where all of your kitchen waste goes, and anything else that you want to feed into the wormery. The next tray is your harvest tray. So this is where you will be extracting your compost from, or I think the term is vermiculture. The worm castings will be in this layer here. And this layer here is really just creating a bedding layer. So when you first get the system, it tells you to put the bedding in one tray, put the worms in and feed it in that tray, and so you're just keeping that tray going. And I never really got out of that one tray system for quite some time. But in reality, that's fine when you first start it. But whilst you're doing that, you should have another tray on the go, getting your next layer of bedding ready. So getting it acclimatized to the overall system and getting the bacteria, so the worms are happy to move directly into it when it becomes the feeding tray. So when you want to harvest, so when you first start, you just have this one tray. I would then create a second tray with some more shreddings in, just dry shreddings, paper shreddings, cardboard shreddings, whatever, in this bottom to start creating up your next layer of bedding. After a month or so, probably 2 months, you can then, this feeding tray then drops down to become the harvest tray. The bedding tray moves up to the top and becomes the new feeding tray, and you then bring in the third tray to start a new bedding. So first few months it's a little bit of just slowly adding in the extra trays, but once you've got the 3 in process, the feeding tray drops down to be the harvest tray, which then drops down to be the bedding tray once you've taken the compost, the castings, the worm castings out of the harvest tray. So at any one time, those 3 have those purposes, and the only glitch in that is when you come to harvest, this particular tray, the harvest tray, goes up to the top. We're only talking for an hour, have daylight exposed so that the worms go down. Everything, any worm that happens to be in the harvesting tray goes down into the feeding tray so that you can harvest all of those worm castings without harming the worms. And then you put it down to the bottom, put a new layer of shreddings in, and start the whole thing again. So feeding, harvest, bedding. Then it goes up, bedding becomes the feeding, feeding becomes the harvest, harvest becomes the bedding. Okay? If you've got the 4th tray, which I have, I'm just going to create that as another bedding tray. So in reality for mine, I am going to add it into the cycle. So what will happen is I'll add some new dry paper shredding in the bottom of here to start forming another bed layer, even though this is a bed layer. I will add it in at this point here. So this will stay being the oldest one. This will then go in here as a newer one. This is the harvest tray, this is the feeding tray. So when it comes to harvesting, this bottom older tray of bedding will move up to the top. The feeding tray will go down. The harvest tray will be emptied and then moved down. And then this additional bedding tray will be at the bottom and be the oldest one, ready to move around. So it's just a cyclical process of moving the things through. I'm hoping I can take harvest of the compost or the worm castings at least every 2 months, which has got to be better than what I was doing previously in the last year. So that's my aim, is to be getting a tray's worth of castings every 2 months. If I can do more, then brilliant, and I will let you know. But that's what my aim is. So that's how my wormery will be running going forward, and hopefully will be as productive and easy to use as possible.